I usually read books on the Kindle. It's so easy to buy a book on Amazon and then have it instantly delivered to my Kindle. But that's not the only benefit. As I'm reading books on my Kindle, I tend to highlight interesting phrases and paragraphs, ones that I feel are worth saving for later processing. What I do is I swipe the area, which I then add as a highlight. I try to also add a note for each highlight so that I can remember the context of what I might have been thinking here as I added the highlight. It helps to give more reason why this highlight was important. And then going to Readwise, all of my notes are being stored through Readwise, which is a really great service for handling items, bringing notes into a central place. So my Readwise is importing things from Kindle highlights and then exporting them to Roam Research. So both of these are premium tools, Readwise and Roam Research, but I would say that they are definitely worth the price as everything becomes quite automated when you're using them. So you can see here that Readwise is hooked up to my Roam Research, and when I'm entering Roam Research, I can see all the new highlights that I've been synced into Roam during that night. I read a book last night, and all of these highlights have been sent to Roam Research the next day. And when I have a lot of these highlights, as you can see. It's a bunch of items that were really interesting, and it can be like going from like 30 highlights in one book to 300 highlights in another. So what I usually do with these highlights is I start distilling them through this kind of process, so that I have the notes in a better format for future use. I've adapted a system called the Zettelkasten method. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube about the Zettelkasten method, so I won't go into too much detail on that system. But if I can keep it short, the Zettelkasten method consists of two kinds of documents. You have the literary note and the permanent notes. Once I started accumulating highlights from a book, I usually the next day create the literary note where I distill the notes down from the highlights. I just bring in the essential ones. And I try also to develop new thoughts based on these highlights and also put them together in a way that it's very comprehensive to look at later on when I'm thinking about things and I'm coming back to these books. So these new thoughts that I formulate, I usually try to create also these things called the permanent notes. So based on the new things I've learned after reading a book, after going through the highlights, I try to create a number of these permanent notes. So in Roam Research, you can see that I have the red book emoji as the literary note, and the green one is for the permanent notes. So these should be thoughts that came from reading a book, consuming some content like a TV show, movie, like a discussion with a person. I don't really care if I'm copying them verbatim, as the book said, as long as I can distill some new insight or actionable thought that I can use. Maybe I'll never use it, but it's still something that I sort of keep in this area, and I don't need to store it in my brain constantly. So in Roam Research, like all these permanent notes, there's also this category system that I use, which is like these 4 digits in front of the name of the permanent note. So they talk about like the first one is kind of like the category, the second one is the subcategory, and the third is sort of a topic underneath that subcategory, and the fourth one is more or less an ID number under the topic for a certain thing that I'm talking. I'm also setting up like a summary page of all the permanent notes, so it's easy to browse and look up for the right topic, the right category, subcategory. So yeah, this is the system I use. I'll add some links to the description, so those should come in handy as well.